I remember the pandemic kicking in full effect. Governor J.B. Pritzker being asked after he shut down the state's economy and shut down schools if he was going to postpone the then primary election that was being held in 2020. I think it was like sometime in April, was it? But ultimately, the governor said that's up to the state legislature. If they want to do that, I don't have that ability to sign an executive order and delay the primary election because people were worried about going to the polling place out of all of the fear that was being put through the media about spreading COVID-19. And ultimately what happened was the primary went on as was, but there were efforts after that for the November election in 2020 to open up mail-in balloting, to where it no longer was absentee balloting, where you had to have a reason to vote by mail, like, for instance, being overseas as a member of the military, or if you like were in a hospital or something for an extended period of time, or maybe you had a trip planned already and you couldn't make it to the polling place in person, so they would give you an absentee ballot. But because of concerns out of COVID-19, and this happened all across the country with states allowing for more mail-in balloting, and we saw just record numbers of mail-in balloting for 2020. But one thing that what is interesting in Illinois is we allow for mail-in ballots, no longer absentee ballots. We allow for mail-in ballots to be counted up to, here we go. We allow for mail-in ballots to be counted for up to 2 weeks after the election. And I was always under the assumption that the ballots had to be postmarked for Election Day. But not everybody's a fan of this, and in particular, a national group, Judicial Watch, they have filed a lawsuit against the state of Illinois concerning this process of mail-in ballot counting. So here we are with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Let's talk about this. And again, you can chime in anytime, live and local, 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here with Springfield's Morning News on WMAY. But what do you think? Should the state of Illinois be allowed to count mail-in ballots 2 weeks after the election? And we had a story about this with Illinois Radio Network and the Center Square where, we talked with the State Board of Elections and they laid out, there could be a substantial number of ballots that don't come in yet for election night. So we really won't know some of the major outcomes, especially for some of the statewide offices like U.S. Senate, Governor, Treasurer, Comptroller, Attorney General, Secretary of State, and Amendment 1. We really won't know the final outcome of that because of the large number of mail-in ballots that there are. So coming up, we'll hear from Judicial Watch's Tom Fenton about some of the thoughts he has about this lawsuit. He shared that on a recent update on YouTube from Judicial Watch. We'll look at just how many mail-in ballots there are across the country right now. But first, your phone calls at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
There should be very little of this going on. If you're too damn lazy to make it to the polling place, you don't deserve to be voting in the first place. There's a few situations where it should be allowed, but none other. This crap of putting it invites crooked behavior, especially in the big cities like Chicago or New York or Boston or Atlanta or Philadelphia. Well, this computerized stuff can be screwed with.
Yeah, in Illinois in particular, I appreciate the call. We recently got a poor ranking by Heritage, the group that looks at a variety of other different types of policies, but they evaluated election integrity in all states and found that Illinois, with its mail-in balloting, especially with its drop box situation, because we have drop boxes all over the state as well where people can go and drop their mail-in ballot in. They raised concern about that because they highlight that you're increasing the amount of fraud if you have lax controls over mail-in balloting. So again, Judicial Watch suing the state of Illinois. That lawsuit is advancing in federal court despite the Democratic Party of Illinois trying to intervene. We'll get details from Tom Fenton himself from a YouTube video coming up here. But good morning. You're on WMAY.
Greg, in Illinois, if it's postmarked by Election Day, it gets counted. Is that the standing rule?
For up to 2 weeks after the election. That's my understanding, yes.
If it's postmarked up to 2 weeks?
No. It has to be
Exactly.
postmarked by Election Day,
Yes.
but
So
they have
you're
up to
relying
2
on-
weeks to get that into the mail.
Well, okay. So as long as he gets it and it's sent out on Election Day in the post office box, then it's up to the blue pants to get it delivered. Correct?
From my understanding, that is correct,
Okay,
yes. Now,
well-
other states do allow for mail-in balloting, but they say that they have to get them in and they have to be in and counted by election night.
Okay, so you'd have to mail it, around here, 3 weeks ahead of the election day?
I mean, it depends
I'm not
the
on
mail
post
service.
Office, they're overworked.
Sure.
I get it, but you're relying on the mail carriers to get this stuff moved. Stuff takes time, man. I know that firsthand. Thanks, Greg.
I appreciate the call, but with this process, this protocol we have in Illinois, again, we won't know for up to 2 weeks the final outcome of some of these races because we could have a substantial number of mail-in ballots pending. One more call here. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning. Yeah, most of the offices don't get filled for, a couple months after the election anyway, so what's 2 more weeks? I'm with the last caller. As long as your vote is received within the mail date of, the postmark of the date of the election, I think it's the duty of the state, county, or whoever's running the county, that they have a duty to the taxpayer to count that vote, no matter if it takes 2 weeks or a month. I mean, it's a legal casted vote. As long as it's within the guidelines, it should be counted. I don't understand. It's not going to change any in the envelope from 2 weeks later, and all this scary, conspiracy crap about, someone's going to get in there and mess with the votes. Come on, man, be serious. There's only so many people who can vote in a county. They're matched up to the name. And you can't just add votes or take votes just because you feel like
Well,
it.
I don't know, man. I got a text over the weekend to my cell phone number, and I'll see if I can pull this up really quick because I was like, wait a second, what is going on here? But it essentially said, "Hi, Gregory. This is Tanya with Black Votes Matter, reaching out to make sure that you have what you need to vote. Our database has your address, and it had it at Gregory Court, and public records suggest you may not have voted yet. This data could be wrong or old. If we got your address right, and looks like your vote location is blah, and it gives that. So yeah, I mean that itself right there for me is a red flag that some of these get out the vote efforts may not be as precise as we would like them to be.
Well, they don't have the records that you voted already, Greg, so of course they're going to keep sending
But
you
they also have my address wrong. They have my first name right.
Okay.
They have my address
Greg,
wrong.
I get calls every day from
it.
people wanting me to vote, and I already voted by mail. So you think that's going to stop up until the
no,
day of
it's
election?
The question is election day on November 8th, where we have the polls closed and we know what the outcome is by the time we go to bed, election 8, November 8th? Or is election day now election month with a couple of weeks afterwards?
If we have to take a month to make sure it's right, counting them after they've been received on the date that they're supposed to be received by, yeah, so what?
All right, I got you down. Coming back after the break, we'll hear what Tom Fenton has to say from Judicial Watch with his federal lawsuit advancing in the courts, despite the Democratic Party of Illinois trying to block that. So stay tuned. That's coming up here next on WMAY, where we'll also review the total number of ballots that there are out by mail. And just looking at that right now, by mail in Illinois statewide, 832,456 mail-in ballots have been sent out, and just not even half of those mail-in ballots have been returned. So we could have an outstanding 500,000 mail-in ballots, and that's something that could very easily drastically change the outcome of an election, especially the statewide elections. So stay tuned. We'll hear from Tom Fenton. His concerns next on WMAY. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Let's get into the latest here with Judicial Watch filing a lawsuit against Illinois. The Chicago Tribune says that federal lawsuit threatens validity of potentially tens of thousands of Illinois mail-in ballots, including possibly military ballots, because Judicial Watch is saying that you can't have votes counted after Election Day, they say. So they actually want to make sure that they're seeking to have no vote by mail ballots counted that are received after November 8th. So cutting it off there, that's what they're seeking to do. And Judicial Watch's Tom Fenton posted an update over the weekend on his YouTube channel to kind of explain their thought behind this and why they're suing. Again, here's Judicial Watch's Tom Fenton over the weekend.
So in many places, we are able to vote, or you're able to vote early, which I think is a terrible thing. I think you should be able only to vote on Election Day. And to the degree we have mail-in balloting, it should only be done in extraordinary circumstances. You know, if you're in the military or deployed overseas, you know, or otherwise have significant emergencies, you need a really good excuse to do a mail-in ballot. That's the way it should be. I think typically you should be voting in person on one day, and we should be deciding the winner on Election Day. And of course, vote by mail has significant concerns about fraud, which also need to be addressed and which many of the left refuse to address. And frankly, too many Republicans don't want to address as well. But one of the other big issues with vote by mail is how long you count the ballots for. I mean, is there a time when you stop? And is the time reasonable? And is the time compliant with the law? Is the deadline compliant with the law? And in Illinois, we alleged that contrary to federal law, Illinois is unlawfully counting ballots up to mail-in ballots that arrive up to 14 days after the election. So over 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks after Election Day, ballots are coming in, and their theory is that if somehow the ballot is signed on Election Day or beforehand, but even if the postmark is undated, they'll count it for up to 2 weeks. I mean, besides the horrible policy of that in terms of encouraging fraud, waste, and abuse, in our lawsuit that we filed to try to stop it on behalf of a congressman and some other citizen voters of Illinois, the congressman is Congressman Bost, it's illegal under federal law, we alleged. And we had this litigation's ongoing. I don't know when the court's going to rule. I don't know if, the court in theory could rule before Election Day, or it could rule after Election Day, but it would change the rules if we're successful, certainly for the year 2024. I don't know what would happen in 2022. So I know there's great concern about the election counting that goes on seemingly forever, practically speaking, after Election Day. And, it's just a terrible policy, I think, for obvious reasons. Don't you agree? And in addition, it's illegal because the federal law that we highlight, I think it's 3 U.S.C. Section 7. My colleagues will confirm that to me, and I'll fix it if I'm wrong. Basically says that Election Day is on Election Day for members of Congress, and similarly, it's Election Day is Election Day for the presidency. So this year it would affect election races at the federal level in Congress in 2024. Obviously, the presidency would be included as well. Now, the left tried to intervene in this lawsuit as a defendant. Now, what does that mean? It means they're trying to gum up our lawsuit by trying to come in and make it more difficult for us to litigate, because the lawsuit is against the essentially the election officials in Illinois.
And that's the Illinois State Board of Elections. And again, that's Tom Fenton from Judicial Watch talking about the lawsuit he has against the state of Illinois, counting mail-in ballots up to 2 weeks after polls close on Election Day. And he says that a federal court did indeed reject the Democratic Party of Illinois' attempt to intervene in this case. So the case is moving forward with a federal judge siding with Judicial Watch to allow it to move forward and to not allow the Democratic Party of Illinois to intervene. So fascinating stuff. We'll, of course, hear more about that as details come out. But something I think is important for us to consider as we have a week and 1 day left before the November 8th midterm general election in the state of Illinois.